Well, this has been a little while coming. I am so excited to take you on a challenging journey that we have been lucky enough to undertake in real life. It's been many months, if not a year or two in the making, this. So, if you are in need of a super snoozy sleep story tonight, then you are in the right place. So, please allow me to take you with us as we spend a full year of our lives exploring and living in this amazing place. Tonight, you join us as we set out on the challenge to lap Australia. Yes, that's right. Many of you may know Christine and I followed our dreams and made our adventure to Australia happen last year. We packed our bags, waved our goodbyes, and set off for an adventure to a place that we knew very little about. Why Australia? We didn't know, which is actually why we went. And that about sets the scene. Why did we go? What did we want to achieve? Where did we end up? What happened along the way? What did we discover? Amazing things? Some not so amazing things? All of this will be uncovered in due time, of course. For those who enjoy a more casual and chatty story, you will love this, because complete with yawns and all, I will, for the most part, be simply telling you about this journey from memory with the help of the diary that we wrote in every day, which still didn't involve or include everything that we did, far from it, and from my memory, and the map, and some photos, as I recount our tales and follow our footsteps around the map as best I can. I really hope I don't forget too much, but I am forgetful, so this may end up being a few parts. I don't know yet. Probably will, knowing me, as you do too. So, excuse me. What did I just say? So without further ado, enough rattling on, Sam, come on. Let's pack our bags and get underway. So as always, lie back, take a nice deep breath, and welcome to our greatest adventure to date. 365 days of lapping Australia. We hope you do enjoy this story. Chapter 1. Perth, Western Australia. this was it then. After a long, long flight, which is about as long as any flight can possibly be, from the UK to Australia, because it is literally around the far side of the planet, we did, in fact, arrive in Perth. I think our flight had 2 or 3 stops in the Middle East and into Kuala Lumpur, and it was probably on the north side of 26, 27 hours. So we arrived in Perth late on a hot, sweaty summer's night in the beginning of February. We'll never forget the moment that we stepped out of the air-conditioned airport into the pitch-black 35-degree Celsius evening of our first taste of Australia. It was quite something, and I don't think either of us had ever felt such heat before at night. We've been some warm places, but it just so happened that we arrived in the heat wave of that summer in Australia. I think it was about mid-40s during the day and low to mid-30s at night. And that was it. That was as cool, if you could use that term, as it got. So warm and exhausted, and carrying with us our whole lives on our backs, which, to be fair, wasn't particularly much stuff because we packed very light. Just hand luggage, I'll say, as well. Honestly, we found our address for the night, which was about an hour or so's journey from the airport, and got the train into the city centre, which was dead. There was nobody about, and for anyone who knows Perth, it's not a very big city, so it kind of felt like a shrunken city, helped by the fact that there weren't many people around. So a little like rabbits in the headlights, we found our way to our home, which was going to be for the month to follow. We were kind of booking places just a month at a time, just to allow us to move freely. But this place was kind of north of the city centre in a place called Norlamara, and the abode belonged to a man called Vince. We arrived late, obviously, about 1:45, bless him, he stayed up. And it was just the most typical Perth place. Wonderfully basic and un-air conditioned, very humble, kind of up our street because we appreciate the simple things, but there were no frivolities whatsoever in this house. It was very simple, kind of live in, live out. The outdoors lived in, and you sort of lived outside as well. But we were so desperate for sleep that we could have been presented with anything for that night and we would have slept fine. Vince himself was quite the character. The man, he was a tradesman, kind of a standard hippie Aussie, or once upon a time he would have partied very, very hard in the 90s. He just sort of had that feel of him. He taught music during the day or on the weekends, can't quite remember, and then laid brick between like 4:30 in the morning and 9 o'clock, which were the only times that you could do anything in that heat. It really was that hot. anything post 9 o'clock would have just been suicide. So after the warmest sleep of our life, we woke up about 5:45 in the morning and just thought, yes, let's walk out and enjoy the morning, our first daylight views of Australian life. So we walked a couple of kilometres to a shopping centre, which is going to be the theme of Australian life. For those listening, you know how important they are. But the shopping centre near Mirrabooka, and the first thing we saw was a McDonald's, and we are not fans of McDonald's normally, but we thought, oh, they do coffee, don't they? Yes, they do. How about an iced coffee? Oh yes, because it was 6 in the morning, the sun has just come up. What a glorious day it was. Everywhere we looked, we could see wildlife that we'd never seen before. All of the sights and the smells, the hot tarmac, almost the scent of the salty air from the sea that was blowing inland. Everything felt new, and there is no replacement for that feeling if you've never been to a corner of the globe before. But this was it. We'd made it. We had made it, so we enjoyed that iced coffee. We really did. We just sat inside, we will admit, because it was already so hot, even at 6 in the morning. We were going to allow ourselves a little bit of time to acclimatise without feeling too bad about trying to hide from the heat. But from here, for the next week or so, we did the typical stuff, I suppose, that everyone does when they arrive in a new place with the intention of being there for a long time. Stuff like opening a bank account, sorting out cash, getting a gym membership, going food shopping, and spending a lot of time cooking and feeding and drinking ourselves, filling up water, freezing the bottles of water so that we could have something cold to drink. But it's safe to say that initially, certainly, we were absolutely smitten with the place. We just found it so cool. And a lot of that, to be honest, was to do with the wildlife. Out the back of Vince's yard, I suppose, he had some seating and a big sort of dirt space. But within that dirt space, the quantity of beasties and birds and all sorts of things that cawed and crawled was just so overwhelmingly awesome. Cockatoos, let's start with them. Everywhere. Big, red-tailed black cockatoos, white cockatoos, the pink galas or galas, whichever way you prefer to say it. How can we possibly forget or not mention the sponsor of Australia itself, the bin chicken, otherwise known as some sort of ibis, I believe. But that was the first time either of us had ever seen them, and they were so funny. Poor little sunburnt heads, long beaks, white feathers, not afraid of people at all, quite content just to sit on the fence nearby and opportunistically peck at this scrap or that. Bin chickens, I believe, have been the name given to them for their willingness to go dustbin diving. But to us, they were brand new and one of the most wonderful things to watch. And aside from all of those common birds, there were bugs and bees and wasps and ants and the flippin' Australian ravens and their call. If you've never heard them, just have a little search for the noise that they make. So fascinating initially. After a couple of days it was brutally irritating, let alone after a year. I think, again, the residents of Australia, if you're listening, will understand. But aside from them, magpies, off the top of my head, honey eaters, beautiful wee birds, who knows how many number of varieties that they were that we saw. Kestrels, kookaburras of course, and the noise that they make. Just the air was vibrating with sounds that we had never heard before, and it sounded so tropical. That's the best way that we could describe it, as everything felt like a different climate altogether. Shortly after landing, we also met up with my good friend, our good friends, Martin and Josie. Now, some of you might know Martin if you've ever listened to the 4-hour sleepy journey, the North Coast 500 sleep story. He stars in that, of course. He is one of my very good friends, and him and Josie, his other half, had been in Australia for about just over a year before we arrived. So we met up with them, got the lowdown, and sort of just took a moment to appreciate the fact that somehow we had all ended up on the far side of the globe together, and wasn't that just quite the thing? And it really was. So yeah, we just had a moment of appreciation for what life could throw up at us, as well as the opportunities it could present, and the fact that we had all collectively taken them. And yeah, we sort of patted ourselves on the back, I think, as a group for doing so. Of course, it was just lovely to catch up with them, because we hadn't seen them properly for a very long time before that. So for the first couple of weeks in Nollamara, in the north of Perth, we were enjoying ourselves quite nicely. We had lots of free time, and aside from me doing sleep stories and making things for all you guys, which was actually very challenging in the heat and sharing the space, we had plenty of free time. We were just cruising around being slight tourists, but overall just busying ourselves with normal tasks each day, mostly just to do with trying to cement our legal position in the country, making sure that nobody was going to come hunting us and chuck us out anytime soon. We had all the visas in place, but in order to survive, there were certain things that we needed to make sure were solidified, namely the bank account side of things and tax numbers and all that good, interesting stuff. Oh, and I almost forgot, but I don't know how, that we couldn't mention the star of the show at Vince's place in Nollamara, which was a chicken that we named George. Yes, Vince had some chickens out the back in his yard, and bless them, one of these chickens didn't necessarily blend very well with the others that were there. This chicken was special, and we really mean that. I'm familiar with hens, of course. Having grown up on Skye, we had many over the decades that we were there. But even saying so, I have never seen or encountered a chicken quite like this one. I will do my best to explain this, but, well, point number one, this poor wee chicken had a bit of a cross bill, so its jaw was slightly out of alignment, which meant that it kind of struggled to peck stuff, or pick things up when it did try and peck for things. So, hypothetically, if it had a small tray of seed or food in front of it, and it was pecking away at the bowl, it would usually send most of the food all over the ground surrounding it, and very rarely pick up anything that it actually aimed for. I shouldn't laugh. Blessed, sweet animal. So there was that. The second thing was that, as I mentioned, I think the other hens could sense that this chicken was slightly different. I don't know how they can, but they did. They did bully it. It was such a wee shame. They wouldn't let it come anywhere near them, and they wouldn't let it stay in their chicken coop or pen. They would just chase it. And this is when they were shut inside, at night, so that they were protected. Thankfully, when they fell asleep, they did fall asleep, but in the mornings when we went outside, all that would be happening was this poor chicken George just was trying to escape the other hens in the coop. But, this little coopy thing was only like 3 or 4 feet by 1 or 2 feet. It was tiny. Just something to place over them at night. But it would just be constantly trying to run away from the hens that it couldn't run away from. It was like trying to hide on top of a box that was in there just to get out of the way, but of course it couldn't. So a number of times that we let it out and on its own, just so that it could roam free to get away from the little bullies, the other hens. Anyway, after we started doing this, George, of course, started to get quite attached to us. We called it George because, of course, the wee thing was quite curious. So it started to get quite attached to us. So whenever we went outside in the morning with our wee iced coffees that we made, it would come running over and come and sit with us on the chairs. Which brings me on to the third odd point about George, and that is that George loved to peck fingernails. Now, we don't know why George liked to peck fingernails, but we believe that George thought that they were food. And George would peck our fingernails for minute after minute after minute. And when I say minute, I really mean hour after hour, because believe me, if we were sitting there for about an hour or so, George would continue, relentless, at our fingernails. And God forbid we were occupied with our hands and doing things, George would then move on to our toes and peck our toenails. Now, she would just peck and peck and peck until, let's just say, our feet were occupied, and then she would move on to a little dot or a freckle or a mole on our knee. You get the picture. George was very special, and she would happily just peck away at nothing for the longest time. And it really did seem like she thought that she was actually eating. It wasn't just like an affection thing. It was, she was special. Yeah, it did seem like she was feeding, because every now and again she would pull her head away, kind of half shut her eyes, and like nibble at whatever she thought that she had just pecked, as if she was kind of, passing it down her gullet. But obviously nothing was there. So. We really did wonder how she had survived until that point, to be honest, because we had to start feeding her a bit of, some of our oats in the morning, just to make sure that she was getting something extra, because she didn't seem to be allowed near the hen food in the hutch with the other hens, because they would just chase her away, as we said. She did enjoy that initially, but she would then just move back onto her fingernails again. Anyway, that is mostly George wrapped up. But obviously we spent a lot of time with this wee chicken whilst we were at Vince's, and she even helped us do up our van. Which brings me on to that. So, what were our plans? We've been in Perth for a couple of weeks. Was a van on the cards? Yes, it was. To have spoiled my own reveal. Eventually we did realise that we needed to have some wheels. It's kind of inevitable in Australia. So we acquired our steed for the year. Or at least we hoped. And that was our van. It was a Mazda E2000 truck chassis with a motorhome strapped to the back. We'd been to see quite a few things before settling... No, this was the second vehicle that we'd seen. Initially we weren't quite sure. She was quite an old girl, and that was okay. Things last a long time in Australia because it's dry, they don't rust too badly. But quite a big girl, petrol, manual, which is fine. Very underpowered, no power steering, weighed about 3 tons. An odd mix, definitely not a city vehicle. But after a bit of toing and froing and wondering, and then being afraid to let the opportunity go, we were then desperate to get a hold of it, because we thought, no, this is the one, it's a bit of a sign, so on and so forth. There's always things telling you that that's the thing for you, that's the van, and there were enough showing themselves to us that we decided this was it. But naturally, it was actually quite a bother getting a hold of it and agreeing to buy it, because if he had other people interested, and then he didn't, and then he did again, and then he didn't, and all that kind of carry on. Anyway, long story short, we did acquire this. It had pretty much everything, maybe a few more luxuries than we were initially planning on having, but at this point we had decided that, you know what, we are going to try and lap the continent. That is going to be our plan. which means we are living in this thing, fully living in it. So we probably will need some form of luxuries. And when we say luxuries, we just mean basic access to power so that I could work, some shelter from the sun, proper shelter, and a comfortable bed. Now, this thing had some of those things already in place. Others we needed to make happen. The bed we needed to make comfortable because it was far too thin. But it had solar panel, it had lithium batteries, it had sockets everywhere, it had a fridge that sort of worked. It melted through cables a lot. It had lots of space. That was the one thing it really did have. It had a wardrobe in it. Gas burners, nice big kitchen, pop-up roof for headroom for me because I'm a tall thing. 6'2" if anyone's keeping count. Yeah, that was it. And we couldn't believe that we'd actually got this thing. So we, for a few weeks, we just cleaned it out, I think. It's like, it's always the first thing you do, isn't it? If you get a new car, well, you clean it. Or at least that's what you do if I've got anything to do with it. But to be fair, Christine was desperate to get it cleaned too. So at Vince's, in the heat, parked in the driveway, that's exactly what we did. We gutted the thing, cleaned it as best we could inside and out, just to learn what state everything was in, and kind of make half a plan about what we'd like to do to it when the time came to renovating it. We've actually got some photos and some film of George, of course, coming and helping us clean the inside of the van, because we couldn't leave a door open without George coming in and doing her thing and just helping us in the form of just pecking us as we were working. There's also some pictures of her in the driver's seat, in the engine bay, and on the bed, pecking Christine's bum, actually, as she was cleaning the walls, I think. Anyway, funny wee bird. We do desperately miss her. And even at the time, we had a serious conversation with Vince about taking George with us. Now, this just came about one morning. I think it was before we were about to leave, when we were chatting away with Vince about George, just kind of letting him know our read of the situation. I'm not sure how aware he was that George was being bullied. I think, of course, George would have been fine. She would have found a way to survive. But yeah, Vince just sort of, he's like, oh yeah, just got myself some chickens, they just look after themselves, don't they? Whereas, George was getting properly hounded, and we was like, seems like she needs a different sort of a home, and he was just said, well, you want to take her with you? We thought, no, that'd be silly. What? Seriously? Well, we won't lie. We seriously considered it. We thought, could we really take George on a lap of Australia? Is that something that we would be willing to try and do? And with all of the fun ideas that does bring to mind, we did immediately start to sort of reason with ourselves about how fair would that be to George in the heat, and we would need to have a space for her inside the van, which there was plenty of space for, but she would need a flippin' dog cage or something. And we'd need to take her out for walks. We'd need to have a harness for her so that she wouldn't run away. And we just quickly came to the conclusion that taking George would be unfair on everyone. I think having her would completely change the scope of our next few months, if not the entire trip that we were in Australia for, and we weren't quite ready to make that decision. Even though, and I promise you, we were so close to taking her. Every bit of our heart wanted us to take her on the adventure of a lifetime. But we were sensible, and I think we agreed with Vince that it would probably be best if she returned to a larger group of birds, so she had more to mix with, rather than it just being the 2 or 3 to create that dominant environment. Anyway, I'm no chicken expert, but I think I recall that's the kind of conversation we had. Anyway, so that was that. It was time to say goodbye to Vince's home, George, and the rest of the chickens. It was a really sad day. And George will forever be in our hearts, as will the home at Nollamara. So what was next for myself and Christine after we left Nollamara? Well, we moved to another Airbnb just north of Mirrabooka, so not particularly far away. The place was okay. It was definitely a place that had once upon a time been nicer, but bless the guy, he was a bit older and I don't think his eyesight was very good, so he didn't clean very much, so everything was covered in dust. Outside, spiders inhabited everything. All of the furniture, all of the the seating places. That he'd kind of created this amazing bachelor pad type outdoor arrangement with a sports area, swimming pool, this covered dining area with tellies everywhere. Sounds rubbish, but there was lush greenery all over the place. It was gorgeous, to be fair. But just imagine such a place untouched for 10 years with Aussie dust and dirt flying in from the desert and spiders having taken over, and that's what this place was like. So we cleared ourselves a small area at the dining table so that we could enjoy our breakfast outside, so without going for a full-on clean, which we would have happily done, of course, but that would have taken weeks, honestly. Either way, we made ourselves at home here for about another month, and it was at this point in time where Christine got her first job. Now, this job was on the other side of the city, near Perth Airport again, and it was with a transport logistics company. Great bunch of people, fantastic. And it was at that point that we started commuting effectively from our new Airbnb all the way most days, of course. So I would drive in about 20-25 minutes, drop her off, drive back, to then go and pick her up again each time. So 4 trips a day. Sometimes I would stay down that way and just park up the van, the big old bus, somewhere relatively quiet just so I could work, but honestly the van was not particularly comfortable to be spending that much time in, not at that stage anyway, so most of the time it was just commuting. But yeah, that was pretty much what we did. We just got the head down for about 1 month. just doing the work, effectively. So what about Perth itself then? Haven't really spoken about that yet. Well, we did a lot of the touristy things. It's a wonderful place, it really is. It's famous for its beaches and the wineries and the vineyards that are nearby. It really is a pretty phenomenal place, and we don't mind saying this either, even after having done a full lap, spoiler alert, of the entire country, Perth is still probably one of our favourite places that we could see ourselves spending any length of time. It does kind of just have everything. It's got some lush parts, in and out, in kind of in between the scrubland and whatnot. But yeah, the beaches, like Scarborough, were gorgeous places to spend time. Very busy, but night markets, a really bustling atmosphere, right on the sea, with the most phenomenal beaches that were just, fairly quiet as far as city-side beaches go. It's just the fact that everything was so accessible for a city. The number of sunset walks that we had on the coast were, I don't have enough fingers on my hands, and it really was the perfect place for that. There was also the Swan River, as well as all the parks that were alongside it. They were fantastic for just absorbing, again, the sights and the sounds of the wildlife that made Perth their home also. We also ended up having a really good time in and around the North Bridge area of the city, which does get a bit of a bad rap for being slightly rougher, but we don't mind a bit of rough, which is why we live in Glasgow. But we found the area quite endearing. It's got lots of great places to eat. It had an outdoor cinema most nights, so that the whole community could enjoy it. There was Chinatown there, and some of the most amazing restaurants that we went back to really regularly, because it's the Australian way, as is this, a lot of the elements borrowed from America's. Eating out's a big thing, so we tend to cook in the UK, and that's what we do a lot. We cook food most nights. We maybe go out for food like once every 2 or 3 weeks, if that. But we did a lot more eating out when in Perth. Usually good, healthy foods, if that was at all could be helped, and we adored a lot of the Chinese and Asian restaurants that did things like hot pots and pho and just big noodly soups with greens in it. So we did a lot of walking in Perth when the weather wasn't too fierce. Most of the walking was, I'm guessing it was done in the morning and the evening, because when the weather was as fierce as it was, as I've said before, you are quite limited to the first 3 or 4 hours of the day, and the last, I wouldn't even say 2 or 3 hours of the day. When the sun was low, both ends, that was the time to do stuff. Walking, working out outside, gym, all that kind of stuff. You had to do it when the sun was low. Otherwise, you'd get, you'd get headaches, sunstroke, all that kind of stuff. Anyway, we adored Perth itself. I think a highlight for us was Kings Park. What a space. That really is a thing to be proud of if you are from that corner of the country. The most beautiful, you could almost call it botanical park, filled with the most dense native varieties of tree and bush and plant, absolutely packed with animals, mixed with, areas of perfectly manicured lawns that look out over the bay. And it's quite high up as well, so you get a really good view. Wonderful, wonderful place to have picnics and relax and have an afternoon snooze in the shade of a tree. Just stunning. And one of our favourite places that we spent numerous nights at is the Moonlight Cinema in Kings Park. I think the first time that we went there was Valentine's Day, which was in the middle of February. And we went to see The Notebook. Now, I've not seen The Notebook all the way through. So I was quite keen. But that was a very, very romantic night, it must be said. A gorgeous, warm evening, spread out on the lawn, with an outdoor cinema, with the stars above, shining down, comfortable, dressed nicely, crisps and nibbles with a bottle or two of wine. That was a real highlight, and we went back there a couple more times, but it was at that point to us that we just thought, this is what it's all about. To be able to enjoy summer weather for a good 3 or 4 months of the year and do this sort of thing. This isn't something that you could do in the UK or in Scotland especially. You'd be lucky if the summer allowed you to for a few nights a year, but it was just reliable, warm weather that you could enjoy the evenings. That was the best bit, to be honest. And going to the Moonlight Cinema in Kings Park it just sort of epitomised it all for us. Another thing we did not too long into our stay there was get away in the van for the first time. So we took a trip down to Bunbury, which is just down the coast. It's not too far away, a couple of hours drive, and this was really just to suss out how the van was on a long trip, as well as how comfortable it was, or wasn't, to sleep in. We had a lovely time. Great place, very typical of a coastal town. I think we had some lovely brunch, some nibbles. I think we went to a few restaurants and had antipasti and good wine, because that's what you do when in WA, because it really does take after the Mediterranean way of life sometimes. That's what it feels like to us anyway. We had a lovely evening swimming on the beach as well, and our first night or two in the van were pleasant. It was lovely to be in such a spacious van, because we only know our van home, our little Fiat Doblo, which is small. It really is tiny. As you know, we have travelled Europe in this little thing for months, as well as all sorts of other trips. Done the North Coast. It's like camping, but with luxuries and a bit more of a solid roof over your head. Whereas this van in Australia was huge by comparison. So to be sleeping in something so spacious was a real novelty, and we loved it. Was the bed comfortable? Not really. That was quite high on our priority list of things that we needed to change going forwards. It needed a good few extra layers of anything underneath us, to be honest. But it was a wonderful trip down to Bunbury, it really was. The next chapter of our time in Perth takes us to Noranda, which is just north-east of the city. Now, the reason we ended up in Noranda next was because of Christine's friends who she worked with. I say friends, they became friends. Janet was the person that Christine worked with closest of all. Janet taught Christine everything that she could whilst at that placement, and it's because Janet was going away for a month. And the reason Janet was leaving was to go to Scotland with her family. So this was a lot of the basis for really striking up this friendship, was that, again, stars just seemed to align. Janet loved Christine, why wouldn't she? And Christine loved Janet. And so, after chits and chats and all sorts of other stuff, we all ended up getting together. So Janet's family, and myself and Christine, we went around, got to know everyone, and met the entire clan, which consisted of Mick, Janet's husband, Alana, Janet and Mick's daughter, and Rom, Alana's partner. Wonderful, wonderful people. And it goes without saying that from this point on, we really did make some friends for life. Since we've kept in touch, and we went to stay with them again once we finished our lap, and they were just the kind of people that completely understood us, and vice versa. They are just the most down-to-earth, generous, wholesome, loving people you would ever meet. So generous with themselves, their energy and their time. And so much so that after only a week or two of knowing each other, Janet invited Christine and myself to look after their home whilst they were in Scotland. And they were going to be away for about 3 or 4, or was it even 4 or 5 weeks? I can't quite remember. But this aligned perfectly with trying to find someone else to stay. And we immediately, of course, said, absolutely, please, that would be amazing. We cannot thank them enough. And you know what the best part was? They have 2 dogs called Sky and Rocco. Now, I really hope that most of you listening have at least listened to A Tale of Two Dogs. It's a story that was released probably this time last year. Go and have a little listen to it if you haven't, because this story is about these 2 dogs, Sky and Rocco. Sky is a Labrador Retriever cross, although she just looks like a little golden lab. And Rocco is just full-on dum-dum retriever. These 2 dogs, to this day, have stolen our hearts in ways that we didn't know were possible. We have since spent a lot of time with other dogs. We've looked after them, we've house sat for other people, but no 2 dogs have ever done so much for us as Sky and Rocco did in that month that we took care of them. They just completely stole our hearts. Sky could go on about all the little idiosyncrasies about them, but Rocco was just the biggest, daft, buff-head dog. Just, you could do anything and you'd just be happy, and just his tongue would always be hanging out, eyes half shut, just always so happy to be there for you. Sky and him would just constantly wrestle, just constant. It would hardly ever end. And Sky, despite the fact that she would pretend to be the most innocent of the two, she would always start the wrestling, always. Anyway, so we had about a month in Naranda where it was just myself, Christine, and the two dogs. So we were basically just living our dream. At this point, we had our camper van. We were living in a gorgeous area of Perth, in a lovely, spacious house with two dogs, barbecue, parks nearby. We were living the dream, damn it. All thanks to Janet, Mick, Alana, Rom. We couldn't make this up. Just everything was just so wonderfully knitting into place. So during that month, we worked very hard, but we also began proper work on the van, and that meant converting it to the way that we wanted it to be and renovating it properly. That was inside and out, new worktops, new furniture, painting everything. It was a lot of work, quite a lot of money, but we did it all ourselves. We're quite handy when it comes to sort of interior van conversions. Thankfully, there wasn't too much aside from just cosmetic stuff to do and making new furniture, but it still took a lot of time. Obviously, we basically had shares in Bunnings by the time that we were finished, including all the tools and the materials that we'd bought. But what a place that is. It's like the DIY store in Australia. Obviously everyone knows it who's from there. And its claim to fame is that, I think it's on weekends or most days, there's usually a hot dog stand outside with volunteers serving hot dogs for like $2. And like, that's their thing. Don't ask. So, aside from the work that we were doing on the van, we also had help from a man called Zach. Now, Zach worked for the company that Christine worked for too. So, Christine and Janet knew Zach. Zach was one of the heavy truck mechanics who would work on and service a lot of the haulage trucks that obviously did the transportation element for the company. We were put in touch with him just to help us do a couple of the little... It was basically just servicey items for the van. He agreed to help us. He wanted to help us. He was absolutely not obligated to do so whatsoever. But to sum the man up, he is just the Aussiest man ever. Such a good guy. Such a lovely chap. When I finally got to meet him, myself and Christine took the van along to him. Me and him just got on so well. We all did, but just a really, really, again, generous, friendly man who didn't even think twice about giving us his time and his energy. Almost hate to say it, he worked on our van for free. And it's not for us not trying to make sure that he was kind of compensated for this. He didn't want anything. Like, he was at the workshop so much, even in his free time, he was like, hey, just bring your van along, I'll just get stuck into it, don't worry about it. Nah. Apologies about the dreadfully accurate accent. I'm kidding. The man would just take nothing, and he just wanted to help. He was very laid back, so although it was free a lot of the time, we would be there into the small hours working on this thing, and basically, apart from the basic servicey stuff, the van had cruise control, but it didn't work. And we desperately wanted to find the reason for this cruise control to not be functioning properly. Now, this is an old system. Not to get into the details, but it's a vacuum-based system. It's not like just an electrical thing like cars these days. And it took us like 2 weeks to finally get an idea of why it wasn't working. But Zach and myself, and bless her, Christine too, although I made sure that she was resting. I've got an image in my head of Christine asleep in the car at like 2 a.m, whilst me and Zach were underneath this flippin' van, just trying to get this bloody cruise control to work and diagnose electronically why it wasn't playing ball. Anyway. We did eventually get this bloody cruise control working, and you might think it's just cruise control. Why did it matter that much? The front of this van was not spacious. As I mentioned already, I am a tall-ish guy. I just fit in the front, and it was dawning on us that, with the scale of the thing that we were about to attempt, it was going to become very uncomfortable rather quickly if we didn't have such a luxury as that. I think the trip down to Bunbury proved that, because if one thing sticks in my mind, it's the fact that I was not very comfortable driving that thing, and that was only for 2 hours, let alone an entire lap of the Australian continent. Just let that sink in for a minute, how far that is. Anyway, bless him, Zach. What a guy. He did eventually, finally, take Australia's other cold and refreshing currency in exchange for his hard work. But we owed him big time for all of the time that he put into that van. We will forever be so grateful to him. So thank you, Zach. You'll not listen to this, but still, thank you. So we had the best month ever, basically. We worked so hard on the van. We loved the dogs. We loved the home. And we got to stay with Janet, Mick, Alana and Rom for a few weeks when they got home, because they invited us in. They made us part of their family, and that still is the case to this day. Bless her, Alana and Rom have since had a pair of twins. We got to meet them over FaceTime not too long ago. I think it was April that they were both born. So yeah, they really are a family, a second or third family even to us now. Some of the other Perthy stuff that we did when we were over this way, what did we do? We found ourselves down to Mandurah Crabfest. That's a thing. That was actually a fantastic day. So Crabfest, I think, obviously it's an annual thing, and Mandurah is a hot spot for crab fishing, hence the festival, and everything crab was on that day. So the usual festivities, music, food, restaurants, all opening up on the foreshore. Gorgeous place. And one of the most memorable parts of that was actually, I think it was the first time that we had seen dolphins whilst on that side of the coast. Note the first time, not the last. Definitely not the last. And the most fascinating part about that was just how close they came in. We are talking a couple of meters off the shore, literally, just a couple of meters. They were just cruising around in the shallows like they owned the flippin' place. It was amazing to see that. We were just absolutely gobsmacked. And that just began one of the greatest realizations and truths about the entire Australian country, is that it's not just about what wildlife you see whilst in Australia. It's the density of the wildlife and the proximity that it will get to you. Now that goes for everything, and dolphins were no different. Not only did they end up being everywhere, but they were so close when they were in. We thought that we had a fairly densely populated country in the UK when it came to wildlife. 1/10 of the wildlife concentration doesn't even begin to describe it. Just everywhere you look, bird life, sea life, anything, Australia has it in spades. And so at the Mandurah Crabfest, seeing dolphins that close, just as if they were nothing, was incredible, eye-opening, stunning. So other things that we enjoyed doing in Perth were, well, we began watching the Formula One that year. So we made a habit of going to the sports bars in, again, Northbridge. We also explored Fremantle, another kind of portside town, very posh, lots of coffee shops, quite, dare I say it, hipstery, but it's one of the cultural and artsy hubs of Perth anyway. Lovely place. Anyway, before we knew it, we were looking at the calendar and it was May. Just like that, 3 months had passed since arriving. So after a couple of weeks of living with Janet and Mick and family, and finally, after we were fairly satisfied that we had finished the van to our liking, and it was absolutely beautiful when it was done. It really, really was. It had gone from like beigey, original, like late 80s decor inside to very contemporary and cozy and colourful. Really, really nice. So yeah, we were finally happy mechanically. Spent a lot of time and a lot of money making sure that it was mechanically sorted as well. It was finally time to set off on our adventure. So with a final wave to Janet and family and to Martin and Josie, it was a case of see you guys in, well, whenever we see you. Maybe we won't. Because it was at that point that we decided to attempt to lap Australia. But we didn't know if we were going to be able to finish the lap. So it really was a journey into the unknown. And we were so excited to get going. Chapter 2. Beginning the lap and heading north into the wilds of Western Australia. It did take us a few moments to leave, a little bit of toing and froing between supermarkets and DIY shops, just making sure that we really did have everything that we needed. We weren't sure what to expect, see. We knew that yes, there are going to be towns, periodically, where we could probably pick up pretty much anything. But it has to be said too, there would be days where we wouldn't be anywhere near anything like that, because that is the nature of Australia in general, but definitely WA. Without having left Perth yet, we didn't really know how it was going to feel when it came to actually departing a city environment. So it was a little bit nerve-wracking, but in a very good way. So the first night, we stayed in a place called Yanchep, which is not particularly far up the coast from Perth. But when we did leave, it really did feel like we are now gone. We have just left. We've left the building. Suddenly all of that suburbia just melted away into like shrubland. Like, goodness, this is it. This is the beginning of a year, potentially, of outback living. We didn't know how far we would go. So as far as we were concerned, this was beginning something that we'd have to get used to quite quickly. So Yanchep was our first night, which is a lovely little seaside village, town, gorgeous beach, and we'd stayed just by the side of the road, overlooking the water. We did finally realise that we did have everything, and when it came to just taking a breath, which we were, I guess, able to do on that first night because we'd finally left, there was an element of just get ourselves gone and then figure out how we're feeling. Are we ready for this? But it was really a sigh of relief, because up until that point, I think we felt like we were just holding off that date. I think we kept pushing back a couple of days, and a couple of days like, oh, we'll just leave it a few more just to make sure that we've got this, or that we can do that with these people. So we sighed a big sigh, and I remember just doing a little kind of video tour of the inside of the van as well as Yanchep to send to family, and the feeling that came along with that, and that was what was to come, or the not knowing what was to come, and we both did feel this. Words can hardly explain how intimidating it is to look at a map of Australia, knowing that your plan may be to lap the entire continent in a van that you don't fully trust yet. It is about 16,000 kilometres, or 17,000, which is about 10 or 11,000 miles around. And that's if you don't have any detours, which happen. They just do. You backtrack, you go this way, you go down there. So add another couple of 1,000 miles on easily. And when we'd spent a couple of hours heading north, only to then look at the map and realise that you have hardly even moved, makes you just realise how enormous the country is. So it was both intimidating, incredibly exciting, and nerve-wracking at the prospect of what this van needed to do. And I say van, and I'm leaning on van because me and Christine can picture and feel this thing when we say it. It was in good mechanical shape, but bless her, this girl was 1992. She was a year older than me. Which isn't old, but for a van. She's seen a couple of years, so it was quite a lot of trust to put in an old girl like that, to go that far in that space of time. It's worth saying that this van had only done 147,000 kilometres ever by this point, and we were about to put 20,000 kilometres on in less than 7 months, 8 months. So we also like to think that this was the journey that this van was born to make, and just had never been taken on it, because as far as we knew, it had never done this. It had just, I think the van came from Tasmania initially, then it lived in Sydney, and then it lived in Perth. That was it. So, apart from small journeys, we don't think it had gone on this sort of a trip. So, anyway. After our stay in Yanchep, which was lovely, the next place that we set our sights on is a place called Lancelin. It's known for its sand dunes and dune surfing. That's definitely a thing that people tend to do there. So we stayed there for a night, just down by the water, and booked ourselves some dune surfing. This was one of the first activities that we did on our trip. Now, we met on this on this dune surfing expedition a chap called Rich. He was the one who would be driving this what can only be described as a desert-equipped 4x4 truck. And when I say truck, it's like, if anybody's ever seen the Dakar Rally, they are honestly like bloody heavy goods vehicles, but just 4x4 with big knobbly tyres on. It was one of these that had a few seats strapped into the back of it, and this was the way of getting across the sand. It was just myself and Christine that were booked onto this tour, so we had them all to ourselves, and yeah, we did some dune surfing, which was good. He took some pictures of us, and then it was good fun, obviously. And then, just after a bit of blether, he was like, do you fancy coming back for a coffee and stuff? We can, get to know each other a bit better and just chill out for a while, because, that's just nice to do that. And we were like, yeah, of course. We'll maybe pop back later once we've, had some lunch, sorted ourselves out. So that's exactly what we did. We went over to his home, which is a nice place, and he made us some coffee. And then, after a bit of blethering about his life and you know, the highs and the lows, as we both probably explained as well, and talked about. You know, there's a real human underneath this Rich, who until a few hours before was our sand surfing instructor, at which point now he was spilling his heart out about everything that had happened in his life, bless him. And we were there for him because, you know, that's what we like to do. We're understanding and empathetic people. So after coffee, he then said, well, this afternoon I'm gonna go fishing. Would you like to come with as well? I've got some creels off the coast. I need to go out and check if there's any crabs in them. So do you guys want to come? And we said, yeah, why not? So that afternoon we once again went back, probably fed ourselves, had a bit of a chit-chat before then meeting Rich down by the water. Now at this point, Rich, I think he'd had a couple of cans, which is totally fine because, again, that's just another Australian pastime, is just the daily beer intake. And that's no judgment because, to be fair, by the end of this trip, we were no different. Anyway, so here we arrive with Rich wrestling this boat off the back of his trailer, and I go and give him a hand. We get this thing bobbing around in the water. I take my fishing gear. Christine, thankfully, was there to kind of chuck this stuff in the boat and give us a hand to push the thing out. Now, at this point, the weather was kind of starting to turn. The wind was picking up, the clouds were coming over, and Rich, over the soaring whistling of the wind, was like, We've only got an hour. We've got to be quick. So we jump in the boat. The water's dead choppy, and we start whaling it out into open water. And then it was at this point where the waves really start to get large, chucking the boat all over the place. So Rich, swift as he likes to be, reaches into the cooler and pulls out 3 cans and chucks them to us, cracks them open, and this is whilst the waves start barreling over the front of the boat, slapping us in the face. So within a few minutes, we are soaked to the skin, freezing, whilst tanning these cans of beer, half a mouthful of seawater, half beer. It's an image I will never ever forget, just looking back at Rich whilst he's blinking the seawater out of his eye, whilst desperately trying to suck the life out of this can of Victoria Bitter, whilst also with the other hand sort of steering the outboard motor in the rough direction of the creels. Won't lie, they're zigzagging this way and that, probably already about 5 or 6 cans deep at this point. It kind of seems to be compulsory that any outdoor task that an Australian does needs to be accompanied by a cracked tinny. If you're not already drinking by the time that you're preparing to do this task, then you're not doing it right. So we did reach the creels, and I think a couple of them did have crabs in, which was great. So me and Rich hauled them up out the water. We had creels when I was younger on Skye, so quite familiar with them, which was nice. Nice to do it again. It's been a very, very long time. So after having got 1 or 2 crabs, I think it's all it was, he then said, oh, do you want to go, we can go across to this island. So at that, I think it's, Lancelin and Edwards Islands Nature Reserve. It's a tiny little island just off Lancelin. And, when in a boat, you might as well go. So we, just to try and get a wee bit of shelter from the wind and the waves, we kind of went onto the beach there and then had a wee walk around with our wee tinnies, which was nice. The sun definitely was not out by this point. Yeah, but nice to have a walk around on this otherwise completely inaccessible island. Watch some of the birds flying around, and there's a wee wooden walkway over that island. I think it's mostly just a nature reserve. We were only on there for 5-10 minutes before then following his instructions to then say, right, now we need to leave again because the wind's picking up. So myself and Christine kind of looked at each other like, alright, let's just go along with all of this and hopefully we'll make it back alive. So, jumping back into the boat, it was yet another 10-15 minutes on the water, and the weather was awful at this point. The waves were huge, the wind was high. Was it even raining? I can't quite remember. Or maybe it was just that much spray from the water coming into the boat. It was just the funniest afternoon ever. We thought, and again, we just looked at each other just thinking, this morning, none of this was on the cards. How have we ended up here in the middle of the water getting drowned by waves with this half-cut guy who was taking a sand duning just this morning? He's steering this boat terribly with one hand whilst again desperately trying to inhale his next beer with the other hand whilst blindly aiming for shore. And honestly, it was so funny. Even at the time, we were just in stitches, just going, well, this is day one. Or day two, where if things continue like this, then we'll be doing alright. So that was our time in Lancelin. We did make it back. And I think the next day, the next morning in fact, I actually went down to the pontoon just to do some fishing of my own. I went down early and didn't catch anything apart from just lots of pufferfish, which I've since learned, like, if you're catching pufferfish, don't bother. Just move on, because if there's pufferfish there, you're not going to catch anything bigger or better. Because if the pufferfish are there, then they've driven off anything worth eating, basically. But whilst I was there, what did I tell you earlier? Here come the dolphins again, and a small pod of dolphins were just mooching their way up the coast, and they swam right underneath the pier and underneath the pontoon that headed out onto the pier. So again, you could look down onto these things. They're just a metre or so away underneath us. And I was like holding the rod there in the middle of fishing going, what do? I want to go back and get Christine to come out and hopefully she can see them. So I did. I just opted for it. I was like, bugger it. So I ran back to the van, went and told her. A few minutes later she came out. I think they'd moved on. I can't quite remember. But either way, Christine did a bit of fishing as well. She caught herself a couple of pufferfish too. We both had the conversation between us going, wait a minute, are pufferfish poisonous? Or is that just us making things up? At which point we have relearned that they are, but I did take them off the line with gloves, I think. Because something was twanging in the back of my mind that they were. It wasn't just, we weren't just making it up. So. Anyway, that was Lancelin. After leaving Lancelin, we headed north on Route 60 towards the Pinnacles Desert, which is a place known for its limestone structures formed a very, very long time ago. I think it was about 30,000 years or something. It's in the Nambung National Park, which is about 200 kilometres north of Perth. We had a lovely day there, walking around, appreciating the incredible geology and scenery. And it was heading past here towards Geraldton. I think we passed Cervantes and Jurien Bay. I don't think we stayed there very long. In Geraldton, we stayed there. We bought some books because we realised that we would need them / want some. The issue with packing light when we went to Perth is just that we didn't come with any of this stuff. So bought some books to read. We explored the town, and what else did we do there? Oh, we went to the Her Majesty's, I think it's Australian Service, Sydney Memorial. I think that's what it is. Might be wrong. It was a Second World War ship, which was sunk. That's up on the hill, a wonderful, poignant place to spend time. What else? We had a beautiful lunch by the old railway cafe. I then got attacked by a giant locust. We were just walking along in the town, and then I got thumped in the chest by this thing, and I was like, whoa! Absolutely papped my shants. And looked down, and there was this humongous locust on my chest, and I was like, bah! And then I just flicked it off. Christine peed herself laughing because it all happened so quickly. But yeah, I was like, it properly thumped me in the chest. I was like, what is that? Big locust. And then that night, I believe we stayed in the desert, somewhere north of Geraldton, off in the dirt, miles off the main road. This was our first introduction to corrugated dirt roads, and we realised that the van did not enjoy those. Suppose it would be fairly obvious that a van with small wheels, because the rear wheels were teeny tiny, wouldn't like rutted dirt roads, but holy moly, it really didn't. Not good. So we kind of avoided them as much as we could after that. But it was a lovely place, right in the middle of the outback. Nice place, kangaroos everywhere. It was kind of like a wildlife park too. But the thing that we remember most about this place? The flies. This was the first taste of flies. Luckily we did have head nets because of the warning from people just saying if you're going north, just take a fly net with you. And this was why. I remember just doing a workout, I think it was in the kitchen, just using whatever was around, benches and stuff. And it's kind of like an outdoor kitchen, but just the quantity of flies that just get drawn to you as like a warm thing, a body with sweat. You just get absolutely mobbed by these blimmin' things. Thankfully this sort of let us in gently to what was to come, because next on our trip was Kalbarri National Park, of course. This is a very, very famous place. If you've ever seen any coastal pictures of Australia with sea stacks and cliffs and archways, it's probably Kalbarri. So wonderful, wonderful scenery again. It was quite fantastic to see this stuff in person, but it cannot be overstated enough. The flies were ferocious. Our faces were covered, like literally covered. Our shoulders, our backpacks, like thousands and thousands of these things everywhere. It's a known problem. It's just a natural occurrence in that part of the world. It's usually because of a cull to pest wildlife. I won't go into too much more detail, but it's just what happens in that territory. So we were fully immersed in all of that. Quite difficult, we must say, to really appreciate and enjoy the scenery when that is your main view. Not gonna lie, when you've got a head net on already, let alone all the flies crawling around everywhere all over your face. Hard to fully appreciate the scenery. But Kalbarri itself, the village of Kalbarri, was a wonderful couple of nights. It's probably one of our favourite experiences over the year, actually. The harbour village was absolutely gorgeous. We stayed for a couple of nights in 2 different campsites, and we met all sorts of people. One comes to mind, a girl who accidentally adopted a dog whose owner ended up in prison, apparently. This dog we met, it was a beautiful white staffy type thing, but crossed with something. We spent some time down in the bay fishing, and one gorgeous evening when the sun was setting. And the funniest thing about the beach in Kalbarri is that, again, the kangaroos just share the space with you. So it was probably one of the most Australian scenic places that we'd been, is just fishing knee deep in the water, watching the waves come in as the sun sets, melting into the water, looking back on red soil landscapes with the kangaroos just nibbling at the grass. It was proper paradise, it really was. We managed to catch 1 fish between ourselves. The aim was to catch enough fish that night for dinner. So we caught 1. We were there for a long time, Christine would say. Like, I was just there fishing relentlessly, adding bait, chucking it out. The fish nibble the bait off, and you reel in, and you need to put bait on every single time. Exhausting work, must be said. So we earned that 1 fish. Another thing was that we could see dolphins out in the bay who kept chasing the fish away, which was another issue, but, pick your problem, I suppose. The following days we explored the gorges of Kalbarri National Park. So we did a lot of walking, which was very hot, but worth it because of the beautiful walks down into the bottom of the canyons. We did explore Nature's Window as well. You will have seen pictures of that too. A very popular tourist attraction, but we kind of went a bit beyond this specific bit that everyone comes to, because we like to usually go a little further than most people tend to bother with. And the geology is phenomenal. The way that the rock just wraps around you, they're kind of like caves, but slightly more open caves, just from wind erosion or millennia old water levels that used to be higher, that have now shrunk away. The shapes in the land that they've left behind are phenomenal. Absolutely stunning landscape, really. We adored it there. But just like everywhere in Kalbarri, The flies were ever present, so we really tried to get used to them as best we could. Because, and in the famous words of someone who was there with his family that we found very funny, they kept landing in our brains. Flies just landed in my brain. Anyway. After Kalbarri, we hit the road once more for a couple of days in the direction of a place called Monkey Maya. You may have heard of this area, which is famous for its dolphins. Now, there's a lot more to see around the Francois Perrin National Park area than just the dolphins of Monkey Maya itself. I think the first night that we spent in this area was at Eagle Bluff Lookout, and we camped there and had a lovely evening walk. And I think the most incredible thing was the quantity of kangaroos who have made their home here. It may sound obvious, but we're talking about tiny little areas in Australia just now. The entire continent has little pockets of kangaroos like this. It's not just unique to these places, and like I said before, this is the level at which wildlife is numerous in this country. And that was always an incredible and wonderful thing to see. So after that first evening, we then headed off to Monkey Maya to do some... what did we do? We went kayaking. We did see the dolphins of Monkey Maya, the famous pods, who get fed at the beach every single morning. That was pretty special, actually. Although, in with the mobs of crowds, we still managed to see the magic in this. And to see the dolphins getting cherished and protected as they are there is only a good thing. It was also in Monkey Maya that we saw our very first, in the wild at least, turtle. It just popped its wee head up in the bay, and we were like, "Wow, it's a turtle! Look, quick!" We were so excited to see one. Finally, a real turtle in the wild. Again, you don't get them in the UK or Scotland. Nothing like that, so very, very novel for us to see. Again, little did we know we would see thousands of the things for the months that followed, but there's no time like the first time, is there? So we were very, very excited. So yes, I think, like I said, we also went kayaking in the baking heat, only to lie on the beach trying to be sheltered by an umbrella in the wind as well, to realise that this really is just surviving. This is hardly enjoying. Because that's the thing, if you do anything in the middle of the day in Australia, you just survive. You don't necessarily get the chance to enjoy it. No amount of sunscreen will help you in those situations. We then hit the road north to a place called Carnarvon. Not usually a place that people spend much time, but we found it particularly fascinating and, I don't know, really quite a comforting place. It's a fruit town, known for its huge exports of all tropical fruits. It sort of occupies that point on the map. When you arrive into Carnarvon, it really is quite the densely treed and forested place. Lots and lots of mango trees, gourds, pumpkins, oranges, all that kind of stuff. It's just everywhere you look, and lots of people who live there make their living based off the fruit harvest. It was at this point when we arrived into Carnarvon that we'd spotted, thankfully, that the van had a fuel leak. I think it was on the journey in, on the road, we just thought, can you smell raw fuel? And we did. We weren't really sure where it was coming from. Obviously, it's a bit of a concern, so when we reached, I think it was the first of our shopping trips, we did, we found a fuel leak, and a bit of a fuel pipe underneath the driver's seat was peeing fuel all over the road and into the engine bay. Not good. Thankfully, I went along to a Repco and got a bit of fuel hose, and it fit. Got a couple of wee clamps. Job's a good one. So, wiped the sweat off our brows there. Wasn't a breakdown, it was just a small issue. And losing about a third of a tank of fuel in the process. We also visited Carnarvon Space Museum, which was amazing, to be fair, and not just because we met a cat called Buzz, who's very famous because he's been at the museum for many years. Carnarvon Space Centre, I believe, played a very significant role, in the first moon landings, because the radar stations, radar? Ugh, I'm having a silly moment. Anyway, yeah, the station there was key for the pinpointing navigation during that trip, so very cool to have actually visited it. We had a fantastic day, lots and lots of interesting information, genuinely well worth a visit if you can go. That evening we went along to a farm that was selling honey. I believe that's why we went, because we ran out of honey and we wanted to buy from someone local. So we went along there, knocked on the door. He was there, thankfully. You never know, because these are small places. Be quite entitled to be busy. But after, forget his name, which is a bit of a shame, but after a good chat with this honey farmer, and after having bought some honey off him, he actually let us stay on his farm in amongst all the fruit trees that night. Bless him, because I think we were just explaining, as we did to everyone, that we'll just find somewhere for the night. So, yep, he let us stay on his farm, which was amazing, and I think after we'd had a good walk around the orchards, he just picked stuff off the trees and gave us all manner of things to eat and to kind of keep for a while. Such a wonderful chap, and very, very sweet of him to let us stay. And it was fantastic to have parked the van in amongst all these mango and orange trees. But yeah, wonderful night, it really, really was. We had a lovely sunset walk just around all the orchards. It's very fragrant. Really drinking in all the good feels from this part of the world. And most people don't talk too highly of Carnarvon, but we really had a fantastic time there. The next place on our map to go to was Quabba Blowholes. Now this was a bit of a detour to go up here, but well worth going to, so we were told. It was an area that we really wanted to explore, just for its, I suppose, its rural nature. It's about 60 kilometres out the way, just to a dead-end road. Very, very harsh coastline, very wild. Now known for its blowholes, This is where the water crashes into the cliffs and is kind of eroded out caves and kind of apertures in the cave walls, and then where the water is pressurized, it then exits through the surface of the earth. Hence these sort of water jets that go vertically upwards. Must be said, what a stunning location. Absolutely incredible beauty. Vast, wild, feeling of complete isolation. Also an amazing place to snorkel, or at least that's what we hoped for and were kind of led to believe. We did snorkel. The currents were something that we were warned about, and, we are quite savvy people. We can spot it, we know where there's danger, and we can appreciate that a wild coastline is exactly that. We are always, willing to go along with some element of risk because of our appreciation for what can happen. So we were snorkeling, decent levels of sea life underneath the surface. But yes, with the tides coming in and out of bits of land where the water level gets shallower, around where kind of little islands are positioned a bit further out, the currents were alarming. They were quick, and honestly, we'll laugh about it now, but Christine and I thought that we lost her at one point. There really was that awful, dreaded moment where I thought, shit, she's away. Christine is being swept away just now, and bless her, she was panicking and trying her best to swim as fast as possible, but she was just getting dragged and dragged and dragged further and further out. Kind of one of those take a rain check moments, because it took a couple of minutes of me calmly drifting with the current, with her, talking to her constantly, just saying, try, keep focusing on swimming, keep swimming, keep swimming, keep swimming, fight the current. I drifted to her, because silly or otherwise, I just wanted to be with her and give her something to cling on to. I finally drifted towards her, and bless her, she was absolutely knackered. Bit scary, and we managed to swim back together, but it took a while. Rough, really rough water. So that was that. Lesson learned, I guess. But beautiful fish, just treacherous waters, that was all. Some gorgeous sunset scenery again. Some of the pictures taken on the thumbnail for this, I think, are from there. Really amazing place. Up here is also the location that's become quite a famous one, we believe, for the King Waves Kill sign. How apt. A very memorable place, and we did get a couple of pictures again with the van. And I think Christine wrote Snooze with Sam on the back of the sign there, but what I didn't see didn't happen. Somewhere that we were desperate to visit after Quobba was almost the destination that most people go to Western Australia for, especially if they're from other parts of Australia. They say, when in WA, you go up the west coast to Exmouth and the Ningaloo Reef. And the reason for most people visiting here is not only for the snorkeling and the reefs that really come in very, very close to shore, to the point that you can just swim in them off the water, whereas the Great Barrier Reef on the east coast is very often miles and miles from the coast. The reefs are just off the shore on the west. So for the snorkeling, but also for swimming with whale sharks. So this is very often a thing done. It wasn't quite whale shark season when we were there, so we opted to book a little trip to swim with some manta rays instead. Now, when we did that trip, as amazing as it was, the water was very, very murky on that day, but still a fantastic experience because yes, we did, with the help of the spotter plane above, we did actually get to swim with them. We did see them. We have set our eyes on a manta ray or two, but the water was so murky with the sand and the tides that these things were like shadows underwater. Like, you knew you were looking directly at them, but just because of the sediment between you and the rays, it's really hard to make a clear picture in your mind. But it did happen. We were there. We have seen them. We have been in the water with them. A phenomenal experience nevertheless. But one of the highlights of the entire year away was when we explored the Cape Range National Park, which is further around the headland from Exmouth. And it is here that I believe that is the reason you go to not only Western Australia, but Australia in its entirety. That is the most incredible snorkeling that either of us will probably ever do. It's one of the highlights of our lives, and specifically one spot sticks in our mind at Oyster Stacks. Here, when the tide was right, the fish were incredible. The underwater world that was painted here was beyond belief. The colours, the corals were healthy. Huge fish, tiny fish, starfish, some urchins. Just an abundance of underwater wildlife. Not only the fish. Here there were turtles in their dozens, all happy, contented, and willing to not come close to us, but they weren't too wary that they would just swim completely away. And something that I will never, ever, ever forget is myself and Christine just paddling around, and the water here was about 2, maybe 3 meters deep, a really lovely depth to be swimming in. There was a wee turtle just having a little sleep on the reef floor, and we were just able to sink down and just sit next to it. And the turtle never knew any differently. It was just having a wee snooze there, and we just went and joined it for just a few seconds at a time, but that was just complete bliss. I just thought, again, this is it. This is what life's all about. To be able to experience such pure, natural things like this was sensational. It was just an absolute honour to be able to experience these incredible creatures in person. You know, besides watching them on nature documentaries narrated by David Attenborough, We have not had that experience ever. And even just talking about it now, it's making me smile. Because that was one of the most special things that I have ever felt. Another thing I need to mention, and Christine maintains that she was very pleased that she was not snorkeling at this specific point. But if the area itself wasn't special enough, here's me just pootling around in the water on my own, maybe 15-20 metres out from shore. Christine was, I think she was reading a book, just, enjoying the peace and quiet and tranquility. I was just snorkeling around, enjoying exactly the same thing. And then two very healthily sized sharks swam from either side of me, meeting in the middle in front of me. And they came from behind me, so they were behind me and they swam either side of me and then met in the front. This was the first time I had seen the sharks, any sharks in the water. Yes, they were reef sharks, just reef sharks, so no, they were not going to harm me. But again, first time for everything, and this was the first sighting of sharks that either of us had seen. And I absolutely, in a fit of both exhilaration and excitement, and slight fear, but only slight, I was like, no, that's enough, I'm going out the water now, that's me. Then just went and clarified with other people that were there, as well as probably just searching what type of sharks they were. But yeah, reef sharks, black-tipped. Nothing particularly dangerous about them, just big fish, but still, wow, what an amazing experience to be underwater in fairly shallow water, just in complete coral reef paradise, looking through your goggles or snorkel mask to then witness two fairly big reef sharks swimming in their natural habitat, literally a few feet from you. Oh, amazing. Amazing. Again, that will forever live in my mind as one of the most special moments. Chapter 3. Heading east to inland Western Australia. When we finally decided to leave the coast of WA, if you could describe it as one thing, it really did feel like finally departing civilization. Now, even if up until this point it had felt like being in the middle of the outback, which honestly it had, I know I've perhaps glanced over a lot of that, but take my word for it, in between a lot of these places that I've talked about were 1, 2, maybe 3 or 4 days of just driving in sandy, bushy, brushy, kangaroo-filled desert, basically. But when we did actually leave the peninsula of Exmouth and kind of set our sights for inland Carragini, we really did feel like this is it. Now we're going into the middle of nowhere. There was always a next level of nowhere. It really does turn out. So into the van and into the headwinds we went. Anyone who's travelled great distances around Australia does understand that, generally speaking, the winds do blow from a consistent and repetitive direction. And it is seasonal based, of course, but it was definitely a thing. Going when travelling east, the winds would be coming from the east, and that was certainly the case when heading towards Carragini National Park. So for a couple of days we just mile munched, forcing ourselves into a headwind that did its absolute best to put our brick-shaped van stopped firmly in its tracks. But eventually we did reach the town of Tom Price. Now this town is known for its mining. We definitely saw many more road trains by this point, and if anybody is unfamiliar, just picture your typical sort of Ford or Mack kind of cab back, engine forward truck that are plenty of in America, and then add 4 long wheelbase double axle trailers in one in front of the other. These things are enormous, literally trains for the road. I have a picture of 1 or 2 of them actually just pulled up stationary from side on, just to have shown friends just how long they are. They can be up to 70 meters long. Absolute behemoths of things. So by this point, the miles were feeling both, kind of wearing but achievable. When we looked at the map to see how far we have come, we suddenly realised that we had actually made a dent in that sort of circular picture around Australia. It might have only been a 15 or 20, not even 15% dent. If that, actually. Maybe 10%. 10% dent in that entire loop, but at least we had done it. So, amongst the headwinds, the relentless sun and the heat, which was only getting hotter the further north we went, the roadkill, the wedge-tailed eagles that would swarm in their dozens around the poor creatures on the side of the road. It's on akin to, when you get collections of bald eagles in the north of America. But these wedge-tailed eagles are twice the size of a bald eagle. So to come across them was pretty incredible. So yes, all of that, like I said, the road trains constantly passing them, it's like hitting a wall of wind every single time one of them passes you on the road. The dust. This was all in our minds. But yes, after a couple of days we did reach Tom Price. And the feel was suddenly very different. It was less a coastal tourist spot and more a heart of Australia mining spot, if you like. It doesn't look like the heart of Australia. On a map, it looks like it's just inland from the coast, but in terms of its geography and geology, it was fairly central and in the way that it felt. One of the first nights in Tom Price, we managed, I remember, to pick up 2 of the largest steaks that we'd ever seen. They were reduced, of course, because we're always out for a bargain. I mean, we can't afford to bloody buy 2 full-price steaks at the best of times. Reduced enormous steaks, and we stayed beneath the mountain of Bruce, otherwise known as Mount Bruce, one night, and we had a wonderful barbecue beneath the stars with some other campy friends nearby, of course, like everywhere. In Australia, you're never really alone, even when you think you are alone. But I remember firing up our little barbecue that we carried with us, a little gas barbecue, taking it down from the roof rack that was above the cab of the van, and this was the first time that this barbecue had been properly used in anger because, I mean, realistically, the weather and the flies up until this point had meant that barbecues were just not particularly practical. As much as that Australia is famous for its barbecuing, it just wasn't practical at all. But it was on this night we thought, nope, we're doing it. So we barbecued these steaks with all sorts of vegetables. And we popped the tunes on, kicked back in our wee camping chairs, and just had the most wonderful meal beneath the stars. It was quite the night, it really was. The next day we actually took it upon ourselves to climb this Mount Bruce. That was the idea anyway. And it was actually a fairly challenging summit. Very, very hot day again, but we put all of our clothing on as much as we could anyway to protect ourselves. Thousands of layers of sunblock. And set off up this mountain, which had a few sketchy bits in it, don't mind admitting. A couple of keep your back to the rock and shimmy round a narrow ledge to sort of make it up to the next part. But once we had conquered our fears and just got on with it, we were rewarded with a pretty phenomenal view, and a unique one at that. Because from the top of Mount Bruce, which is the tallest peak in the area, in Karajini, you can see for what seems like 1,000,000 miles, because you're looking onto relatively flat Australian outback, and it honestly looks like, or feels like, sorry, that you're looking across the surface of the moon, or maybe the surface of Mars. But not only that, from the top you can see down and into, although they're many miles away, but down and into a lot of the mines that surround that area. You can also see the railways that carry the iron ore that is mined from inland here all the way out to the coast, where the iron ore is shipped in such quantities that means it's the highest exporting port of the southern hemisphere of stuff. And said port is actually where we were due to be heading, which I will tell you all about very shortly. Either way, the views from the top of the mountain were pretty damn spectacular, it must be said. For a day or two after this, we ventured into the national park itself, Karijini National Park. Who's keeping count now how many times I've said this was probably one of the highlights of our entire year? What can we say about Karijini? It was the most stunning blend of achievable, enjoyable walks that you didn't have to be out for days and days at a time for. Some well-needed lush greenery and trees from the water sources around the, ever-present but still no less impressive red rock, the stunning geology, the ice-cold blue waters that flowed through the canyons, many of which you could swim in, such as called Fern Pool, Kermit's Pool was another one, Hancock Gorge, Knox Gorge, all absolutely incredible. I think on a number of days we'd spent kind of joining other people travelling too, of course, but exploring these and, of course, having a good dip along the way. It's just all part of it. The icing on the cake for our time in Karijini was probably the place that we stayed for about 3 nights, I think, after actually leaving the boundary of the national park. And that place was called the Albert Tog... I was going to butcher this one way or another. Toglolini. Look out. Albert Toglolini. This is just off the main road of all places, heading north on Route 95. Now, I think we stumbled across this place just out of kind of needing a place to stay one night. But wow, if we thought the places we'd stayed were scenic until this point, this just about topped pretty much everything we could have ever imagined. It was a kind of a rolling landscape that was at fair altitude as well, set in the middle of the hills, on a hillside, I suppose. But the vista was phenomenal. Every little camping spot was almost perched on its own little lookout. Some had trees next to them, and each felt like it was made just to feel like you were on the edge of the world, and then the earth just fell away from beneath where you'd pulled up to camp. And of course, like it always is, in the outback, with every day comes the end of every day, and the sunsets were something to be savoured. We enjoyed the place so much that we thought, let's just stay here. We don't need to venture on. Let's take a few days, recharge, relax. Just take some time for ourselves. And that's exactly what we did. We went for a few walks, otherwise we sort of stayed put, tried to stay as cool as possible. Probably failed, it was still absolutely bloody roasting. But it remains a highlight. That whole time we spent in Karijini really was one of the top experiences of our entire year. From the walks to the fresh water swimming, to those closing out nights that we spent by the fire, underneath the stars, on such an amazing place as that. Once we were all nice and rested, our ultimate destination, by this point we supposed, was the place that we headed next. It was a long day on the road, but as we went further north and further north once more on the Route 95, we eventually ended up in sunny Port Hedland. It's not even ironic, it is literally sunny. But if you don't know about Port Hedland, and I mean every country probably has one, it is the port, the town that is known for its heavy industry. That's its primary reputation. And Port Hedland, in this instance, was to be our home for the next 8 weeks. Why? Well, by this point we had actually been on the road for a month. Now, I was working as normal, and I don't blame her. Christine wanted something to occupy herself with. So, after a bit of communication, she managed to secure herself a job. It did take an interview, but she absolutely smashed it because, you know, it's Christine and she does these things for fun. So that was that. She got herself a job with the town of Port Hedland, doing her thing, which was amazing. So we ended up having about 3 to 4 places that we'd move between to stay at first. The airport was one. There was a lay-by there that was well off the main road, well off. It was actually really nice there. Beautiful views. There was 6 Mile Creek, down a dirt road for about 15 minutes to the water's edge. Stunning spot, absolutely riddled with sandflies though. Where else? There was the Turf Club, initially at least, that you could stay up for 3 nights, I think, for free, before needing to move on, hence the other options that we had. And then there was the one in South Hedland at the dog park. That was what we were doing initially. So Port Hedland as a place is a funny one, it really is. What sums Hedland up? Well, the aforementioned iron ore trains and road trains coming in and just ditching thousands and thousands and thousands of tons of iron ore every single day, all day, to enormous cargo ships waiting at port. That's its main industry. So it's kind of just like one big machine, Port Hedland. And you can't escape it. You're always close to it. Even just looking on the horizon, you can see just piles, you know, like skyscrapers of iron ore and salt, actually, as well, waiting for export. Very interesting for about 5 minutes. There's also a lot of fishing done there as well. In terms of wildlife, the usual array of Australian cockatoos and ravens, also ospreys and other sea-dwelling eagles. Plenty of them as well. Maybe the slightly less shiny side of Hedland was Perth was a good indication as well. But this is just an Australia-wide social problem, and it is a real problem because, it breaks our hearts. But the difficulties faced by the Aboriginal population, the natives of Australia, short history, but obviously anyone who's even slightly looked into the way that Australia was unfairly colonized by the Brits, and everyone has treated the Aboriginals very poorly over the centuries, and the government's kind of shaped it in such a way these days that it still doesn't work well. Aboriginals have been led to be treated poorly still, to the point where it feels like a lot of native Australians don't quite understand that their own history is pretty shallow. Anyway, a lot of the problems that have been accepted as being such over the last century have kind of just been had a quick apology made and then been swept under the carpet by funding and so on. Still a problem. A lot of alcohol abuse and drug abuse, unfortunately, and Headland is a similar place. The industry of the town brings in a lot of Westerners to work temporarily and families to grow up and move there, but maybe not for long, and the Aboriginal population feel like they're sort of outlawed as a result. A difficult place in that respect. Eventually, after Christine had worked where she had for a wee while, they offered up a place for us to park our motorhome, or our van, not far from the offices, and it was a house with a nice driveway on Padbury Place, which is right on the waterfront, right by the beach of Headland. Which, it might sound a bit odd to do that, but, we had everything we needed anyway. We didn't need a place to stay. And this is how affluent the industry is that they own a lot of the property in Port Hedland, the companies who do the mining. So they've got a lot of empty ones, empty properties just sitting there. So I said, oh well, this house isn't lived in just now, the guy is away, why don't you just stay on the driveway? So we did. And it kind of felt like having our own house for a wee while. But it was really cool, because then we could just walk Christine to work and kind of make ourselves at home on the waterfront there for a wee bit. It was kind of an odd, challenging time that we had in Headland, the heat, working in the van, if it was me, constantly, and a bit of a strange, forced social element. Town events were had fairly frequently, to be fair, but it kind of felt slightly synthesized sometimes, like most people there were just there for the one thing, and that was for money and to earn, and the efforts made, which was amazing that they were made, but they were there sort of just to sort of create a culture that wasn't really naturally happening. Anyway, that sounds like I'm moaning. I'm not. Far from it. Because we still managed to have a good time, because we were ultimately Port Hedland residents for a while. There were some amazing things that we experienced there, not least just enjoying the evenings where we would just walk along the shorefront, through the parks, between the harbour and where we were staying, just for miles and miles, along the very well kept pathways and with the sunsets. Oh, it was absolutely stunning. It really was. We would go down to the beach and do a bit of yoga every now and again, just to sort of stretch off after working days. We would have workouts in the morning or on off days too, in the park, just to take our little mobile TRX gym and strap it to a sun shelter and take the wee speaker boombox and just get the tunes on. Yeah, we did have some amazing times. And although we were ultimately quite desperate to get away, in the end we knew that our time working here would make our trip way more comfortable, without having to make just my own wage go the distance. When you're fueling a 3-ton van that does about 13-14 litres per 100 kilometres, over 10,000 miles in 6 months, it really eats away at your cash. Anyway, way more comfortable it would make us, and we were just being opportunistic. So yes, it was like 6 weeks of, literally commuting to and from work, having public showers every day, multiple times a day. Yeah, just like living a normal life anywhere. You just adapt, and that's exactly what we did. Now, as we were coming to the end of our time in Port Hedland, we were getting very excited, but there were a couple of wee things on the cards just before we went, and one of which was, I believe, a travelling circus. And when I say circus, I mean just like a festival type affair that had lots of different shows on. It wasn't like a flippin' traditional animal circus. It was more like comedy and other performances, as well as lots of fairs, that kind of thing, and like a crafts show, trade show, that kind of thing. That was one thing, and we fancied having a nice dinner as well. And that was before we'd headed, kind of like a celebration. So, on the night of the circus, let me tell you this wee story. On the night of the circus, we had booked to go and see this comedy show, so down into the, flippin' race course, that's what it was. I was trying to remember where this thing was held. Yes, Port Hedland has a race course, as in for horse racing, anyway. So the fair was held down on the green. It was a beautiful night, actually. Again, lots and lots of merchants travelling from all around. Loads of street food. It was that sort of event. It was wonderful. We came across this one merchant with a display of wonderful, ornate, handmade shell jewellery. Now, we'd seen a few things like this on our travels, and we'd never just quite committed to getting something for us both. We like wearing rings, and we were having a look across the range that this guy had, but we genuinely couldn't decide. We're awful for this. We just genuinely couldn't decide. These things were not a lot of money, but we like to have matching things. Sounds silly, but that's just the way we are. Whatever. We just said, you know what? We'll just go and take a wander. We'll go along to this comedy show that we've got booked in a tent, and we'll come back. Asked him, when are you going to be here until what time? And he said, 8:30. I said, perfect. Right, we'll come back before 8:30, well before, and we will definitely take some things off your hands. So that's what we did. We went away, we had some dinner, we went to see the comedy show, and afterwards we came back to the guy's tent. And what had happened? He had closed, and we were so gutted. We just thought, We are such wallies, honestly. We should just be much more spur of the moment sometimes. We don't have to think about everything that we do. So we were a wee bit gutted. We were a wee bit gutted. Anyway, we got over it fairly quickly because, it's not the end of the world. We would come across something similar. But a bit of me just realised and thought that, what would be really nice is just, Christine was really kind of in love with those things, as it turns out. As was I, to be fair. So, anywho. The next day, we had a dinner booked. In the evening, it was like at the restaurant that everyone seems to go to. It's always busy, it's always full. And it's for good reason. It's very beautiful. Kind of just the place to go in Port Hedland if you're going to have a nice dinner or some drinks with an ocean view. It's a gorgeous place, right on the waterfront, on the promenade. Kind of the place that makes the whole place make sense. So we'd had that booked for the evening because we'd just reached the end of our time. Christine had done an amazing job, working hard. We were just going to celebrate us, just to say well done, and well done for enduring Port Hedland, because as much as we did enjoy it, it really grated on us a lot of the time as well. But something was still bothering me, and it was the fact that we had missed those rings. And so that morning I got up quite early and took a walk down to the racecourse. I was banking on what time people would start to get up in the morning, as well as start packing things away properly. Anyway, I went down to where this vendor had been who was selling the rings, and there wasn't anybody about. Nobody was stirring. It wasn't too early, but I was hoping that at some point the guy would wake up and or be outside. So I hung about for about 15 or 20 minutes until finally the guy emerged. And he just said, "Oh, it's you. Weren't you here last night?" And I was like, "Yep, it's me. I said we would come back." And he was like, yeah, fair enough." So, long story short, I did ask him, would you mind getting these specific rings back out of... Because he'd packed all the stuff away, bless him, all in his truck. So I did feel a bit bad for that, but he was getting a sale, so I didn't feel too bad. Anyway, did manage to collect a couple of rings from the guy and get them back to the van before Christine was properly awake. And so, fast forward a few hours, and we went along to our dinner. We got all dressed up and had a wonderful wee drink in the sunshine as the sun was setting. And as our meal was arriving, the waiter first of all put our food down, and then, ooh, what's this? A little plate arrived with 2 shell rings on. Now Christine was thinking, what's going on here? Looked at me, shook my head, I don't know. But yes. No, only put up that ruse for a couple of seconds just before picking hers up and just saying, here you are. So I put it on her finger, and she was honestly absolutely blown away. Bless her, she started crying as well. But just, yeah, I'd kind of snuck out the back and just asked one of the staff, would it be okay to have them just given to us at the table when the food's coming as well, and blah blah blah. Anyway, silly, but in like a sort of funny, romantic kind of way. Nothing too serious, of course. Never is. But anyway, they made a very, very memorable little evening. Which, yeah, and we still got the rings. They did sort of disintegrate over time because they're not very, they're quite cheaply made, but we do still have them, and we'll turn our attentions to fixing them up again soon. So aside from that last night, we did other lovely things in Headland, like visiting the kangaroo sanctuary, enjoying nights at that 6 Mile Creek camping spot, which was just absolutely littered with hermit crabs as well. When the sun went down, we found a shark that had been washed up. That was cool. And again, hundreds and hundreds of turtles just littered the coastline of Headland, so as much as it's a mining town, lots of wildlife there, really loads and loads. Always turtles just bobbing around in the water whenever you looked out to sea. So that initial turtle that we saw all the way back in Monkey Mire, loads by this point. And I think one of our favourite things to do was have barbecues down in Cemetery Beach Park. It's an Australian thing, this, I think, is that public barbecues are definitely a thing. Very often, most places, in fact, that have people living near them will have barbecues in parks with sunshades over them, and they're free to use. So you just press the button, gas fires up, and away you go. So bring your own tin foil and cook away to your heart's content. We did this probably once a week the whole time that we were there, in a gorgeous place that is Cemetery Beach Park. Stunning, again, nightly sunsets, when barbecuing never really gets old, especially when you've cracked a tinny or two. But yeah, plenty of wonderful memories from Headland as a whole. But finally, after a couple of months, again we're talking months already here, it was time to move on. It was already near enough the middle of August. We'd been in Australia for 6 months by this point, and we'd only reached about 10 or 15% of the way round the country. Now, I'm no mathematician, but we were behind schedule. But the way that we were looking at it is that it was time for our road trip to really begin. So we'd kind of lined our pockets, we'd done our time, we had a van that was ready to hit the road properly, and we were gonna set our sights on the far east coast. Time frame? We didn't know. Eventually would be when we'd reach the east coast. Of course, we were hoping maybe to get round the entire loop by Christmas. At least that was the idea. So, would we make it all the way round? Who knew? But full of confidence and doubt in equal measure, we readied the van, and with a final wave goodbye to the town of Port Hedland, off we went. What a relief. What was the next stop? Well, a little spot along the coast called 80 Mile Beach.